As with any physical sport, injuries are inevitable. Some go their entire career without getting a major injury, and some seem to be out of action all the time. With the recent injuries plaguing the 5-star Grand Prix, I wondered how often do Stardom wrestlers actually get serious injuries? While doing my research, I discovered a lot of injuries, but some seemed to only last for a show or two and then the wrestlers were back. That's why the video is titled Big Injuries instead of just Injuries. In this video, I will only be talking about the injuries that kept people out of action for a considerable amount of time. If an injury only made them miss a couple of shows, then I don't really see it as something too big to mention here. I'll be splitting these up by year, and starting at 2017. Anything before that period isn't really important to modern day Stardom, as a lot of the wrestlers are either gone or completely different wrestlers than they were before. Before we begin on the big injuries, I'll highlight some smaller instances that didn't amount to much more than just missing a match or needing some stitches. Momo. When talking about minor injuries or getting hurt, no one else has been busted open as much as Momo Watanabe. While not a lot, when considering that it happens rarely, the fact that it has happened to Momo twice seems mentionable. During a match against some foreigners, Momo Watanabe got kicked in the face by Bea Priestley, resulting in her lip getting busted open and bleeding considerably. It was actually getting smeared all over the mat. It was pretty crazy. The second time was during her first attempt at the white belt against Io Shirai. During the end sequence that finished the entire match, Momo was busted open once again, resulting in the finish with blood smeared around, considerably even on Io's legs. Others. Since it's rare for someone to get busted open more than once, everyone else will be in this spot together. The first that comes to mind is a very confusing mess up resulting in Starlight Kid's nose getting busted by Konami. To this day, I still can't come up with a completely believable explanation as to why it even happened. The next that really comes to mind is Jungle Kyona getting her nose busted by Viper. Back in 2017, during a crossbody, Viper ended up landing hard on Jungle's face, resulting in Jungle's nose to start bleeding for the rest of the match. Recently, Hana Kimura bit her tongue while getting kicked by Momo Watanabe, resulting in her tongue needing stitches. This did result in a pretty gnarly ending with Hana spitting in Momo's face and Momo's face being covered with blood. 2017. Starting off 2017, we have Hana Kimura. Sometime right before 2017 or early 2017, Hana Kimura suffered an injury to her wrist, resulting in her missing considerable amount of time, also having to have a replacement for her in her title match, as she was 1/3 of the Artists of Stardom champions at the time. She wasn't out for too long, but she did end up losing the triple belts because of this injury. Sometime in March of 2017, Yoko Bito injured her hand. I couldn't find too much info on it. The English Stardom account didn't even tweet about it, I guess. She ended up staying out for a couple of months. Shortly after, she would actually end up retiring altogether from wrestling for a second time. Sometime in October of 2017, Tam Nakano decided to take some time off to heal up some nagging injuries. She was out for a couple of months until coming back for the Odotai vs Queen's Quest Loser Leaves faction match. This also won't be the last time that she is on this list, unfortunately. Next would be a very serious injury. Momo Watanabe suffered an injury during training to her ACL. This happened in the beginning of February, and she would be out until November 4th. This is the most serious and longest injury on this list. This took a very important time away from her, but wasn't something that stopped her progress. She came back with a fury and went on to top the company in a little over a year. The next big injury that really affected things, and arguably the most sad one, was Mayu Iwatani's injury in September of 2017. During her World of Stardom title match, Mayu ended up dislocating her elbow. This was the most tragic, as this was considered Mayu's time to finally be on top. Word was that Mayu was supposed to defend the title and go on with the red belt. Even worse was her return, she didn't even get the title back. 2018. The first injury of 2018 involves Chris Wolf. While I couldn't find anything on how exactly she got injured or even when, I do know it happened at the beginning of January in 2018. While there isn't any word from what I can tell on how she got injured, or specifically when she did. My theory is that she was injured during a match with Momo Watanabe, where Momo performed a B driver on her and Chris seemed to look pretty off afterwards. Next is a semi-little injury. Tam Nakano injured her foot in April but was only out for about a month. She was still there for 2 separate matches in April, just didn't have any in between the beginning of the month and the end. I believe she was injured sometime before April but was wrestling injured and needed to take some time off. But it was announced in April. Next would be none other than Leo Onozaki herself. When people hear she has been wrestling for a year and still is at the level that she's at, they don't tend to realize that 3 months of that year she was actually out of action with an injury to her lower back. She was injured in November and didn't return until February of 2019. Moving on to 2019, the year of injuries, honestly. There seemed to be so many this year. This thought process is what led to me wanting to check if this year really was more bad than the last couple. Starting with Ruka and her shoulder injury in February. During a singles match against Saki Kashima, an arm drag gone wrong resulted in an injury. She would be gone for about a month or 2 before returning at the end of April. Next is another youngin'. Rina also got injured this year. In May, she suffered an undisclosed injury and wouldn't return until the end of July. Since I couldn't find a reason for the injury, it must have been something serious but not too serious. Next, we will go with Utami Hayashishita's first injury of the year. An injured finger she achieved sometime before her New York match against Momo Watanabe. She wrestled the match with the injury and then got the surgery on it after. It appears to have been some kind of broken thumb, so she was out for only about 2 months this time. Next is an injury that wasn't really talked about as much, but seems to be a pretty serious injury. Hanan hasn't been in the ring since May of this year. I believe she has some kind of injury to her spine or something like that. There was only an announcement on the Japanese Twitter account, and we all know how terrible Google Translate is, so the information is kind of unreliable. Next is Mayu taking some time off from a knee injury she got from catching Tam Nakano during a top rope crossbody to the outside. When it happened, she didn't really take too much time off, but then took about a month off from wrestling during May to June. Next would be the knee injury that Azumi had experienced at the end of April this year. While she had a leg brace on basically her entire time out, she ended up only being out for about a month's time. Returning in early June, she seemed to be fine, and her injury seemed to be much less serious than what people were assuming it was. Next is Utami Hayashishita's second injury this year. Again, another finger injury, but this time it seems to be her pinky. I don't know what she is doing in practice, but she needs to start protecting her fingers more. 2 separate injuries to 2 separate fingers in 1 year. This was a very bad time, as she had to drop out of the 5-star Grand Prix, and is still currently out of commission, but at most, if not all shows working ring second for her QQ members. Next and last injury in this video is the most recent one. Jungo Kiona during her 5-star Grand Prix match against Jamie Hayter. While it hasn't been explained exactly what has caused this injury, it looked like during the slam after the backbreaker, Jungo landed on her shoulder wrong. This caused a dislocation of her right shoulder. They stopped the match after some coaxing from Daichi, the ref. She also had to drop out of the tournament, and she will be out for around 3 to 4 months before she can fully recover, according to some reports on how long it usually takes a dislocated shoulder like hers to recover. So, at the end, does 2019 seem worse than the last couple years in terms of injuries? It does look like it is. The problem is that there are plenty of reported injuries I left off this list, because the person really only missed a show or 2 and it couldn't have been that bad. And there's probably some from 2017 that I just completely missed, as it's been over a year to 2 years since I even watched any 2017 match. It's kind of hard for me to remember that far back. But what could be the cause of the increase of injuries? Are the wrestlers not as good and therefore messing up more? I don't believe that that's it. Most of the injuries actually happen during practice and not in the matches themselves. The biggest thought that people have is that the girls are being overworked. The amount of shows each year steadily rises starting in 2017. The difference in amount of shows between 2016 and 2017 is 6 more matches. Then 6 more matches again between 2017 and 2018. There are 3 more months left this year, and they already have almost the same amount of shows they had of all of 2017, and they actually have already done more than what they've done in 2016. Hopefully this increasing roster will mean more rest time for the wrestlers, as it's hard to not notice that the amount of shows increasing also correlates to the amount of injuries happening.